Why did wild animals stop hunting humans? There was a time when humans were just another animal. No cities, no walls, no metal weapons, no hospitals waiting if something went wrong. If you were born 200,000 years ago, every journey beyond your camp carried the same question. Would you come back alive? Across the African savanna, lions rested beneath scattered trees. Leopards vanished into tall grass almost without a sound. Hyenas patrolled the darkness, listening for weakness. Giant crocodiles waded beneath still water, where the surface looked calm enough to trust right until it wasn't. For our ancestors, these weren't rare dangers. They were neighbors. And unlike today, humans weren't at the top of the food chain. They were somewhere in the middle, strong enough to hunt smaller animals, weak enough to become prey themselves. That creates a puzzle. If humans were once hunted like many other animals, why isn't that still true today? Millions of people hike through forests every year. Researchers spend decades tracking wolves. Photographers stand only meters away from bears. Divers enter waters where sharks are known to live. Dangerous encounters certainly happen, and every tragedy reminds us that wild animals are still wild. But compared with the number of people entering predator territory every single day, attacks are astonishingly rare. Most predators never even let us know they were there. Why? The obvious answer is that humans became stronger, but that's only part of the story. In fact, strength may not even be the most important part, because the biggest change didn't happen inside the human body. It happened inside the minds of the animals that hunted us. That sounds impossible. After all, lions don't hold meetings. Wolves don't read history books. Leopards don't pass down survival manuals to their cubs. Yet generation after generation, predators quietly learned the same lesson. Humans were becoming different. Not impossible to kill, just unusually expensive. To understand why, we have to forget everything we know about modern civilization. Imagine waking before sunrise on the African plains. The air is cold. The fire from last night has almost burned out. Somewhere in the distance, hyenas are still calling to one another. You pick up a simple wooden spear and leave camp with a few others, hoping to find food before the heat of the day arrives. Every sound matters. Birds suddenly taking flight. Fresh tracks pressed into damp soil. The silence that appears where insects were buzzing only moments ago. Each could mean exactly the same thing. A predator has arrived. Modern humans often imagine prehistoric life as one endless battle against wild animals. The reality was more complicated. Most predators weren't searching specifically for humans. They were searching for the easiest meal they could find. That distinction changes everything. A lion doesn't survive by fighting the toughest animal on the savanna. It survives by making good decisions. Every hunt carries a cost. A broken tooth can make it impossible to catch prey. A damaged leg can mean starvation. Even a deep wound that becomes infected may prove fatal long after the fight is over. For predators, survival has never been about courage. It's about calculation. That single idea unlocks one of the biggest mysteries in nature. Animals don't simply ask, "Can I kill it?" They ask, "Is it worth trying?" And for hundreds of thousands of years, humans slowly changed the answer. Not overnight, not through one invention, not because of one extraordinary individual, but because each generation added something new: a sharper spear, a better campfire, a smarter way to communicate, a safer place to sleep. Alone, none of those changes transformed humanity. Together, they reshaped the way predators saw us. Imagine you're a young leopard. You've spent your entire life learning how zebras move, how antelope react, how warthogs escape. Every prey animal follows familiar patterns, until one day you encounter humans. One runs. Another climbs a tree. Someone throws a rock from far beyond your reach. Then more people appear, shouting from different directions. The hunt no longer follows rules you've spent your life learning. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. You hesitate. And in the wild, hesitation can be just as important as attack. That hesitation would become one of humanity's greatest advantages. Because predators don't fear what is powerful, they fear what is unpredictable. And humans were becoming the most unpredictable animal on Earth. But unpredictability alone wasn't enough to change millions of years of evolution. The real turning point came when humans discovered something that no other predator had ever mastered. Not sharper claws, not stronger muscles, something far more dangerous: the ability to fight from a distance. The first time a predator was struck by a stone thrown from beyond its reach, nothing in its evolutionary history had prepared it for that moment. Pain usually came from teeth or claws, not from a small object flying through the air. For millions of years, distance had protected predators as much as it protected prey. A lion's claws only mattered if it could close the gap. A leopard's speed meant little if its target stayed just out of reach. Humans quietly changed that rule. Long before bows and arrows, our ancestors had already begun turning distance into a weapon. At first, they threw rocks. Then came sharpened wooden spears. Eventually, those spears flew farther, straighter, and with greater force. Each improvement seemed small. Together, they transformed every encounter between humans and predators. Archaeological discoveries suggest that early humans steadily refined projectile technology over hundreds of thousands of years. The exact timeline is still debated, but the pattern is unmistakable. Humans were learning to fight without entering a predator's world, and that made them unlike any prey animal on Earth. Picture a leopard watching a small group gathering branches near sunset. The easiest decision would be to rush forward before darkness fully arrived. Instead, someone notices movement. A stone whistles through the air. It misses, but the message lands perfectly. This hunt will not be easy. The leopard slips back into the grass. No battle takes place. No dramatic chase follows. Yet that quiet retreat is exactly where the story changes. History is shaped just as much by the hunts that never happened as by the ones that did, and humans were becoming remarkably good at preventing those hunts from ever beginning. But throwing rocks wasn't the real revolution. It was what came next: fire. Today, a campfire feels ordinary. For early humans, it changed almost every part of life. Cooking made food easier to digest. Warmth extended survival into colder climates. Light pushed back the darkness. But one of fire's greatest advantages was psychological. Night had always belonged to predators. Human eyesight faded quickly after sunset. Large carnivores, however, were built for darkness. For countless generations, dusk signaled a shift in power. Then humans carried daylight into the night. Imagine approaching a campsite from the edge of the trees. Orange light flickers between the branches. Smoke drifts upward. Voices rise and fall. Figures move around a fire that crackles without warning. To us, it's a familiar scene. To a wild predator encountering it for the first time, it was something entirely new. Fire didn't simply create light. It created uncertainty, and uncertainty changes behavior. Even today, many large mammals approach open flames with extreme caution. Not because they understand fire in the human sense, but because unfamiliar things often carry hidden danger. Nature rarely rewards unnecessary curiosity. It rewards caution. That same pattern appears again and again across the animal kingdom. Wolves abandon hunts when conditions suddenly change. Big cats stop chasing prey that behaves unpredictably. Even sharks often investigate unfamiliar objects before deciding whether they're worth biting. The most successful predators are not always the boldest. They're usually the best at avoiding costly mistakes. Which leads to a surprising realization. Perhaps humans didn't survive because they won every fight. Perhaps they survived because they convinced predators that fighting wasn't the smartest option. But humans weren't relying on weapons alone. They possessed another advantage that was quietly becoming even more powerful: cooperation. A zebra depends on its herd. A wolf depends on its pack. Humans depended on something even more flexible: communication. One person noticed tracks. Another remembered where lions had hunted the previous week. Someone else recognized the warning calls of birds hidden high above the trees. No single human carried all the knowledge. The group did. That meant experience no longer died with the individual. Every close escape became a lesson. Every mistake became information. Every success made the next generation slightly harder to hunt. And unlike claws or sharper teeth, knowledge could improve within a single lifetime. Predators evolved through natural selection. Humans evolved through culture. That difference changed the pace of evolution itself. But here's the twist. Humans weren't the only ones learning. The predators were learning too. A young lion that survived an encounter with armed humans behaved differently the next time it saw them. A leopard driven away by fire became more cautious around future camps. Generation after generation, the individuals most likely to survive were often the ones that avoided unusually dangerous prey whenever easier opportunities existed. Without realizing it, Humans and predators were shaping each other's behavior. It wasn't a war, it was a conversation. One fought not with words, but with countless decisions repeated across thousands of generations. And that conversation was about to spread far beyond a single hunting ground because humans were no longer adapting only to the wilderness. They were beginning to reshape it. By the time humans had learned to defend themselves more effectively, another transformation was already underway. It had nothing to do with stronger weapons or faster hunters. It had everything to do with memory. Imagine two children growing up thousands of years apart. The first learns through experience. The second learns through stories. One survives because of luck. The other survives because someone else's mistakes became their lesson. That difference is almost impossible to overstate. Most animals inherit instincts. Humans inherit knowledge. A lion cub must learn to hunt almost from the beginning. Every generation repeats much of the same process. Human children, on the other hand, could begin where the previous generation had ended. Knowledge didn't disappear when someone died. It stayed with the group. That simple advantage allowed human progress to compound in a way nature had rarely seen before. A safer campsite, a better hunting route, a warning about crocodiles hiding beneath a particular river crossing, the discovery of a poisonous plant, none of those ideas changed history alone. Together, they changed everything. Every lesson reduced uncertainty. Every generation became slightly better prepared than the last. Over centuries, those tiny improvements became enormous advantages. Eventually, humans stopped reacting to nature. They started predicting it. A flock of birds suddenly taking flight, fresh paw prints crossing a trail, the silence of insects that had been chirping only moments before. To most animals, these were simply parts of the environment. To humans, they became information. And information often meant survival. As communities grew larger, knowledge spread farther than any individual ever could. A traveler arriving from another valley didn't just bring food or trade, he brought news. Where wolves had been seen, which waterholes crocodiles favored, which forests had become dangerous after the dry season. Long before maps, humans were already building networks of shared intelligence. No predator could compete with that. A leopard might know every tree inside its territory. Humans slowly learned entire landscapes, then entire regions, eventually an entire continent. This ability allowed our ancestors to survive in places where they had never evolved. Frozen tundra, burning deserts, dense rainforests, towering mountains. The human body changed very little. Human knowledge changed constantly. And wherever humans settled, the landscape began changing with them. Small camps became permanent villages. Villages became towns. Trees disappeared to make room for fields. Rivers gained crossings. Animals that had hunted the same valleys for thousands of years suddenly found unfamiliar sounds, new smells, and people everywhere. The wilderness wasn't disappearing. It was becoming something different. For predators, that meant one thing. Certainty was disappearing. A wolf no longer knew where open grassland ended. A leopard could no longer rely on familiar hunting paths. Every year, human activity expanded just a little farther. Not enough to notice in a single lifetime, but enough to reshape entire ecosystems over centuries. History preserves the evidence. Wolves gradually disappeared from much of Western Europe as agriculture spread. Lions once roamed across southeastern Europe, the Middle East, and far more of Asia than they do today. Humans didn't defeat these predators through individual battles. They changed the world those predators depended on. That may be one of the most overlooked truths in human history. The greatest victories aren't always won in combat. Sometimes, they're won by changing the rules of the game. But if humans became so successful at discouraging predators, why do attacks still happen today? Because evolution never signed a peace treaty. Wild animals haven't become tame. A bear isn't being friendly when it walks away from hikers. A shark isn't showing mercy when it loses interest. A mountain lion isn't respecting humans. They're making decisions. The same kind of decisions their ancestors have been making for hundreds of thousands of years. Is this worth it? Most of the time, the answer is no. Modern attacks almost always happen under unusual circumstances. A predator is surprised at close range. A mother is protecting her young. Food has become scarce. Or an animal has learned to associate humans with easy meals. The details vary. The underlying calculation does not. That may explain one of the greatest misconceptions about the natural world. People remember the attacks. They never see the moments that didn't happen. Every single day, somewhere on Earth, a predator catches your scent, hears your footsteps, or notices movement through the trees, and quietly turns away. No headlines are written. No videos go viral. Nothing dramatic follows. Yet those invisible decisions tell us far more about the relationship between humans and wild animals than the rare encounters that capture global attention. And once you begin noticing those silent choices, an even bigger question emerges. If humans once struggled simply to avoid becoming prey, how did we eventually become the species capable of changing the behavior of almost every large animal on Earth? That answer is even more remarkable. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about human history is the belief that we conquered nature. We didn't, at least not in the way most people imagine. Early humans were never the strongest animals. They never had the sharpest claws, the fastest legs, or the most powerful bite. If evolution were only a contest of physical strength, our species would probably have disappeared long ago. Instead, humans changed the game. Rather than evolving into better predators, we became better decision makers. And, over time, we influenced the decisions of other animals as well. That's a very different kind of power. Think about what happens when you walk through a forest today. You notice birds singing, leaves moving in the wind, perhaps the distant sound of flowing water. It feels peaceful, but hidden from view, another story may already be unfolding. A wolf catches your scent from hundreds of meters away. A bear pauses as the wind carries your smell through the trees. A mountain lion watches from a rocky ridge before silently turning in the opposite direction. You never see them. You never hear them. You never know they were there. To you, nothing happened. But to those animals, a decision was made. A calculation was completed. Not because they feared humans unconditionally, but because hundreds of thousands of years of shared history had quietly shaped that choice. That is the invisible legacy of our evolution. Countless encounters, countless lessons, countless moments where attacking a human simply wasn't the best option. Those forgotten moments changed the future far more than the rare attacks we remember. History often celebrates dramatic victories, the battles, the discoveries, the great inventions. Yet some of the most important events leave almost no trace. No witnesses, no written records, no legends, only a silent choice made deep in the wilderness to walk away instead of attack. Perhaps that's why this story is so easy to miss. Success is often invisible. You rarely notice the disasters that never happened, yet they may have shaped civilization more than the ones that did. So, why did wild animals stop hunting humans? The truth is, they never completely stopped. A hungry predator can still attack. A surprised animal can still defend itself. Nature has never been safe. What changed wasn't the instinct to hunt. What changed was the calculation behind the hunt. Humans slowly became an animal that usually wasn't worth the uncertainty. And that may be one of the most extraordinary evolutionary achievements any species has ever accomplished. Not because we became unstoppable, but because we changed the odds before the chase even began. The next time you walk through a forest, remember this: somewhere beyond the trees, something may already know you're there. It has smelled you, heard you, watched you. For a brief moment, your lives intersect. Then, without you ever realizing it, the animal turns away. You continue your walk, believing you were alone. But you weren't. You were simply the latest chapter in a relationship that has been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years. And perhaps the most remarkable part of that story is what happened next. Because after humans learned how to stop being prey, we did something no other species has ever accomplished. We turned wolves into companions, wild cattle into partners, horses into allies, and transformed fear into cooperation. How did that happen? That story begins where this one ends. If you enjoyed this journey into our ancient past, the next chapter is even more surprising. How did the world's most dangerous predators become humanity's closest companions? The answer rewrites almost everything we think we know about domestication, evolution, and the relationship between humans and animals. You won't want to miss that story.